Sanbonani, Riperile, Dumelang, Dimadekwana.
South Africa has announced the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions 2 years after they were imposed in order to curb the spread of the virus.
Fellow South Africans, for the past 750 days,
in a televised address, President Cyril Ramaphosa said the national state of disaster has ended. The president says the easing of restrictions come as lesser death and COVID-19 positive cases are reported compared to when the virus was first detected in South Africa. Masks will be required indoors for another month. Also, in the new regulations, international travelers will need to show proof of vaccinations or a PCR test not older than 72 hours.
While the pandemic is not over, and while the virus remains amongst us, these conditions no longer require that we remain in a national state of disaster. Going forward, the pandemic will be managed in terms of the National Health Act. The draft health regulations have been published for public comment. Once the period for public comment closes on the 16th of April 2022 and the comments have been considered, the new regulations will be finalized and promulgated. Since the requirement for a national state of disaster to be declared in terms of the Disaster Management Act are no longer met, Cabinet has decided to terminate the national state of disaster with effect from midnight tonight. The Disaster Management Act provides that certain elements of the regulations may remain in place for a limited period for post-disaster recovery and rehabilitation. Accordingly, certain transitional provisions will remain in place for a period of 30 days after the termination of the national state of disaster to ensure essential public health precautions and other necessary services are not interrupted while the new regulations in terms of the National Health Act come into effect. What this means is that all regulations and directions made in terms of the Disaster Management Act following the declaration of the national state of disaster in response to COVID-19 are repealed, meaning done away with effect from midnight tonight, with the exception of a few transitional measures.
He said although the pandemic was not over, he was confident that there were only better times ahead. Mr. Ramaphosa said it was important lifting the ban to boost the South Africa's economy and create more jobs. South Africa has recorded far more coronavirus cases, more than any African country, while accounting for almost a third of infections across the continent. It has officially registered over 3 million infections and more than 100,000 fatalities.